Hello everybody, my name's Anne, and for a very long time, I lived under a terrible pressure without suspecting it because my relatives seemed to hate me. We always had a big family. My grandparents, my dad's parents, turned out to be very clannish people, so they gathered everyone they could around them. My grandparents had 3 kids, my dad, uncle, and aunt, plus their wives and husband, plus their parents too. And, of course, the younger generation. We all lived on a large farm. We had it prepared for ourselves. Technically, everyone had their own house with land. But in fact, all this was one territory, just divided into parts. The main house belonged entirely to the old people, and the smaller houses belonged to the rest of the family. I wasn't the oldest or youngest, clearly in the middle. The relatives provided us all with 3 of my older brothers, 2 younger sisters, and another, very small brother. The kids weren't divided. We were always together, mostly under supervision of the old relatives. Honestly, I don't know how the situation turned out to be the way it was. My sisters were pampered a lot because they were both pretty, like marshmallows, like princesses. My brothers were proud of their strength, endurance, and talents. The younger one was constantly being carried around because he was still a baby. And there was me, and no one cared about me. I have an ordinary, average, typical appearance. I don't have a good shape either. I'm overweight, but doctor says it's just a stage and would soon pass. My nose could be shorter, and legs longer. And the most important thing, I didn't have any talents at all. My sisters both, though not twins, and generally from different parents, could sing amazingly. One of them draws watercolors, and the second one was very interested in music. My older brother is a master of sports. He's a professional boxer. He won a lot of awards and cups. My first middle brother is a brilliant programmer, who at 18 is doing software for sale and earns a lot, plus swam on the level of CMS. But especially, he didn't progress in this way because he didn't want to harm his head. My middle younger brother, who is only 1 year older than me, was talented in his studies. Consistently, he only got high scores, and the whole school liked him. Even the youngest, still quite little, at 3 can read poems by heart and sculpt something very beautiful out of sand. Against their background, I was somehow completely lost with my ordinariness. I studied well, and that's all. In sports, I wasn't even an average person, rather lagging behind. I didn't have any musical or other creative talents. I had some problems with my memory, so I couldn't recite poems by heart either. Anyway, this is a wrong saying about kids of geniuses who were born without any extraordinary features. Of course, because of this, the attitude towards me and the family was specific. For a very long time, I was simply not noticed. Like, if you close your eyes to the problem, it will disappear itself. But I'm not a problem. I'm a person, and I wasn't going to disappear anywhere. Then they started bullying me. In fact, I don't think on purpose. But every member of our big family felt it their duty to show me my failure of personality. Everything I did was criticized right away. As a result, I decided not to do anything, to avoid humiliating myself in front of my overly talented brothers and sisters. My parents also tried to disown me. They didn't help me. They just said that the others had better children. But they got me. And you know, until I was 16, I thought that was okay. I cried, of course. I was offended. But like, if everyone had this, it means everything was okay? Every day I was told I was a fat, useless loser. First, my parents told me these things. Then one by one from all the brothers and sisters. Then from other relatives. And then my grandparents finished me off. With their lamentations, I was a genetic error, or I had somehow been replaced in the hospital. Because 2 talented, bright parents couldn't have such a mediocre kid. It was my only life. It wasn't any easier at school, because we were all studying in one place, except for the seniors, who had already gone to the high school or had just finished their studies. And of course, the teachers tried to emphasize that I'm just a gray mouse against the background of my relatives, which is pulled from C+ out of respect for the family. And my classmates saw this, and also looked at me in every way possible. I didn't have any friends, because I'm not worthy of having friends. More precisely, some of the guys tried, even went against the crowd of my relatives, but they were also weak students who were poisoned against me as well. And my parents always said you can't be friends with the weak because even you can slide, and I ignored them. As a result, when I entered high school, I turned out to be a quiet, intimidated animal, afraid to open its mouth. And why do they still ridicule, insult, or go through my appearance? The only person who tried to open my eyes to reality was a school psychologist. On Sundays, she was the only one who tried to convey to me the idea that no one has the right to humiliate me. But her stories didn't convince me, because I thought I deserved to be treated like this. Like, how could it be otherwise, even if my parents thought I was dirt that didn't even deserve a sweet smile? And then it was time for college. It happened so that I was not accepted to a respectable college because of my low scores, and I had to limit myself to a regular school for everyone. Of course, this also became a cause for mockery. I was upset too, until I found myself in a new college, and that's where my eyes literally opened. It was like a flash of light in a dark room. Seriously, everything suddenly became so strangely understandable that I even began to cry. And it's all because the kids didn't try to bully me. They smiled at me, met me, and even offered to communicate. And the teachers didn't break down and poke me with my own uselessness, but praised me and said that everything would work out. Me! It was such a painful new experience that I burst into tears right in the middle of class. But even then, no one was laughing at me, but on the contrary, they rushed to support me. Anyway, it turned out I was completely different. Of course, there were bullies in my class, and potential inmates who were already registered with the police. And the girls weren't nice at all. They were all ordinary people. They were not the kind of celestial beings my family made out to be. Very quickly, I found new friends. I even became the protege of our 2 stars of the class, the most beautiful, successful girls. Cheerleaders. They said one can't be so downtrodden, and that cosmetics work wonders. And I believed them. I can't say that my relatives were delighted. They continued to insult and humiliate me, and it seemed to me that they were even stronger in this now. They told me everything, from the fact that I was a disgrace to the family to a lot of prohibitions, because allegedly with my appearance and talents, I don't need anything, even normal clothes and cosmetics, because no one would ever look at me. The only problem was that now I knew it wasn't true. My classmates and new teachers managed for the first year to make a normal, adequate person out of this little mosquito I was. And somehow, I realized that what is happening in my family isn't a normal thing. And of course, I decided to rebel. I started to respond to rudeness and insults. No one is perfect, yeah, and you can get to everyone if you want. And everything I said, by the way, was the purest truth. Just in the family, it was fashionable to only notice my shortcomings. Of course, I was immediately put to the enemies. My parents solemnly declared they only wanted to raise me as a human being, but apparently they didn't succeed. Well, all the chorus increased the pressure. That is, all this time, they just needed a girl to beat, and as soon as the girl had her own opinion, she abruptly became bad and disgusting. They didn't like me before, and nothing changed after. Yeah. It got to the point they even offered to kick me out of the house by a general vote. That is, literally they wanted to drive me out like a black sheep from this white flock. Thanks at least they didn't offer to burn me, but I wouldn't be surprised at that. That's just where my relatives miscalculated. I left the house. The fact is that my new friends showed me real life outside of the family, including helping me get a job. My dad's classmate was looking for an assistant, and if there was one thing I learned, I knew how to keep all sorts of papers. In our family, my mom usually did this, and I peeked and listened to how she was doing this. So I had a part-time job, and it was just possible to combine it with school. My social studies teacher helped me with a house. I just rented my small apartment at a minimum cost. He was living with his family at the time, in a house provided by the school, so there weren't any problems with it. Of course, Things were not going okie dokie at all. There were puddles on any path. But most important, I was free, and no one was eating my brain any longer. I found out I still had some talents, although not exactly those respected in my family. I was a really good manager. I had no equals in terms of analytics and collecting all kinds of information. So very soon at 20, I became a manager of a large company. And I could afford a good apartment with my salary and a business class car. Moreover, I could travel, and I had a compulsory study. My boss insisted on it. The main department even gave me a special vacation and schedule for this. As a result, I'm now successful, well off, and have a good career. I'm still average in my appearance, but recently, my boyfriend proposed to me, and my relatives are trying to make peace with me, saying they always wanted the best for me. I'm not ready for a reconciliation yet, and I don't know if I ever will be. My new family is my colleagues and my ex-classmates. Yeah, we still communicate and actively support each other. I don't know why I need people who haven't needed me all my life. Hi, my name's Ashley. I'm 18. Seems like I'm just a normal girl. I study at the university, play sports, hang out with friends, but I have a secret. It's very personal. Usually, such secrets aren't even shared with close friends. But what if some girl finds herself in the same situation? Like me, maybe my story will help someone and save someone from making mistakes. Everyone knows that the very first time happens only once in a girl's life. But for me, it happened that I already had 2 of them, and maybe there'll be more to come. How did it happen? So, this is what I'm about to tell you now. It all started when I was 15. Me and my friends thought 15 was the coolest age in life ever. We threw parties secretly from our parents, skipped school, and escaped out of the house at night to hang out. Anyway, we had a great time. And next to our school, there was a technical college, and mostly boys studied there. We often saw them in the coffee shop nearby, located exactly between our buildings. Me and the girls immediately noticed a group of 3 guys. At first, we just looked at each other. Then we started saying hello every time we met. One day the guy sat down at our table to meet us. We started hanging out together a lot. Walking, going to movie theaters, hanging out at parties, playing computer games. I liked Max the best of the group. He was tall, handsome, and so mature. Anyway, any girl's dream. Over time, I noticed he paid more attention to me than to the other girls. He treated me to a cafe. Well, he started this game. When Max invited me for a walk, just the 2 of us, I was over the moon. It's a date, right? I thought then. And yes, that it was. We walked for a long time. He walked me home, and I gave him my first kiss. We started dating. I was so happy. I didn't tell my parents I had a boyfriend. They're just very strict and conservative. In their opinion, at 15, I should have focused on my studies, only to enter a good university. When it came to my friends and parties, all the conversations always ended up in scandals, shouting, and quarrels. I hate to think what would happen if I told them I had a boyfriend. So I didn't say anything. My relationship with Max was rapidly developing. This was my first experience. So I didn't know what was right or wrong and just followed my boyfriend. Since he was older, and he already had girls before me, over time, I started noticing kissing wasn't enough for him. Max wanted to be closer. So more often, instead of walking, we stayed at his home to be together and do what couples usually do. Once he asked me to stay overnight with him, and then I realized this is the night my first time will happen. I lied to my mom I was staying with a friend of mine, and she let me go, grumbling. I was very worried. I read a lot of information on the internet about how it should be, whether it hurts when you have your first time, what it takes to be prepared, and so on. Fortunately, Max had experience in this, so he promised me everything would be just fine, and he didn't cheat me. He cooked a romantic dinner, confessed he was in love with me, and anyway, it happened. In the morning, I woke up so happy, lying in the arms of my beloved one. But this happiness didn't last long. I hadn't even woken up when Max said it was time for me to leave because his parents would be back soon, and it wasn't a good time to meet them. I must admit I had hoped for a slightly different morning after such a night, but meeting his parents wasn't part of my plans. I didn't tell anyone that my relationship with Max had reached a new level. My friends might have told someone else about it, but my mom? Well, it was scary to even think about it. And then something strange started happening. Max didn't respond to my messages, ignored my calls, only said he was busy, and didn't show up when we all hung out. I was very worried, and then I saw him on the street walking with another girl. They walked hand in hand, and obviously they were more than just friends. After that, he couldn't get out of it, and said his feelings for me were gone, and we should break up. It was very unexpected and painful. I cried at night, trying not to show my condition to my parents, but they still noticed my depressed state, black eyes and lack of appetite. My mom insisted that I get a full checkup because she was worried about my health. I didn't resist, but if I knew what the consequences would be. Anyway, the gynecologist ordered tests and examinations that are only prescribed to girls who have already had intimacy with guys. At first, my mom thought that there'd been some sort of mistake, and she started arguing with the doctor, but she left the doctor's office deadly pale. Without saying a word, she nodded at me and we went home. I knew I was going to have a terrible scandal at home. My mom screamed and cried. My dad almost tore his hair out. They said I had shamed them, shamed the family, that they had brought me up so bad, and that all this was the result of my communication with my friends. Anyway, that day I heard a lot of pleasant things about myself. I was put under home arrest and banned from going anywhere other than school. My parents barely spoke to me. A couple of days later, my mom put a pamphlet from the medical center on my desk and told me she had signed me up for an operation, hymenoplasty, or surgical innocence restoration. I didn't know they did such things, but it would restore a more or less good relationship with my parents, so I agreed. I had no objections for the operation, and we set a date. The doctors convinced me the operation is safe and would not harm my health in any way. Everything really went well, and I became a girl again. I talked to my mom. I told her everything honestly about Max, and only after that, our relationship started to melt a little. Of course, after such a bad experience, I no longer thought about relationships and focused on studying. I graduated from high school with honors, and I went to study at the university in a city nearby. Of course, it was hard for my parents to let me leave my home, but their desire to give me a good education was stronger. I quickly got used to the student's dorm, to new acquaintances, and immersed myself into my studies. And then Mark came into my life. He was the president of the student society of our faculty, a handsome, excellent student, and an athlete. You know, there are such stars in every university. They're always followed by a crowd of fangirls in love. They are praised by teachers, and all the guys dream of being friends with them. I have no idea how or why I attracted his attention, but at one of the student parties, he came up to me and asked me to dance. I thought it was time to forget about the situation with Max and move on. I couldn't be alone forever. Mark immediately told me about his intentions. He invited me on a date and suggested we become a couple. I decided to give it a try. The girls in my class shook their heads when they found out that me and Mark were dating. They'd heard from the girls in high school that Mark collected girls and changed them like gloves, even several at a time. Was I unlucky again? I thought so. But on the contrary to what everyone was saying, Mark was very attentive and caring to me. He always helped me, gave me some flowers and gifts. I fell in love and stopped paying attention to the conversations behind my back. Maybe they're just jealous of me. When I realized that it was getting close again, I started thinking, last time it didn't end up well for me. But Mark was different. He's obviously serious about us. And he even said he wants to go to my parents' house one weekend to meet them. Anyway, my feelings won over the voice of common sense, and my first time happened. I didn't tell Mark I had an operation, and he didn't need to know anyway. I was very afraid of the morning after a night together, but even then Mark pleased me. He took care of me, hugged me, and kissed me. My fears were gone. But a couple of months later, the same scenario repeated. Ignoring messages, constant business at school, in the family, part-time job, and then an unpleasant meeting with him and his new girlfriend at a party when I accidentally caught them kissing in someone's kitchen. I cried and couldn't believe it had happened to me again. And then suddenly, I was afraid, what if my parents found out I had made a mistake again and lost my innocence? They could take me back to my hometown, and not only will I miss my education, but I will lose their trust and respect forever. I thought about it for a long time, and in the end, I decided not to tell them anything. For almost 6 months, I worked in several places at once, collected the necessary amount of money, and went to the clinic to have this hymenoplasty again. Everything went well, and without any bad consequences. But now it seems to me that after my 2 unsuccessful first times, my new first time will not be soon at all, because I got completely disappointed in guys and relationships. Maybe it'll take 6 months or a couple of years, and I will forget it all. But for now, I'm sure I don't need any relationships.
Hello people, my name's Henry, and I am that unfortunate person to live in the company of a bunch of girls. Why? I'll tell you. I always had some problems with girls. Well, I don't know how to tell beautiful stories, how to be cute and do other things these beautiful creatures like. I didn't get lucky with my appearance either. Instead of a beautiful face, I have the sad face of a sloth. Also pimples. Instead of abs, I have a hollow stomach with protruding ribs. My arms are too long, and when I worry, I start to lisp. So, I'm still not the king of parties, yeah. But in fact, this did not bother me too much because, as expected, I'm a nerd. And until 16, I was not interested in anything other than studies, computer games, and fantasy novels. I'll say more, the girls even scared me. Although, they still scare me, especially now. My friends were just focused on other realities, but of course, in our conversations, we sometimes mentioned cute girls, like Mary from a parallel grade, but it was more like a chatterbox. Even at the prom, me and my company did not try to lose our virginity. We simply propped up the walls. Write in the comments if you also have some problems with the opposite sex, and say what you do to fix it. The only exception in this hopeless world of acne and loneliness was my best friend Diana, but her problems with her appearance were even worse than mine, and honestly, I never saw her as a potential girlfriend. She was just my harmless and anti-sexual girlfriend. Well, on the other hand, when I once did something stupid and invited Mary, the first beauty of the school, who was rumored to date high school students, it was Diana who told me why I was wrong and how I should live. And she even tried to tell me what really interested these girls, but I'm still not sure about her words. Because if you look at her, Diana, I'm sorry, but you don't look like a true connoisseur of girls and feelings at all. So I lived a usual life of a typical loser and geek. Like every honorable geek, I dreamed once I would find myself in a crowd of beauties, and I would definitely show them a real alpha hiding within. Well, I myself believed I had it within somewhere. I even tried to go to some trainings from coaches who taught me to love myself and communicate with girls. I must say right away that it didn't help. Anyway, it seems to me that this thing helps only those who are handsome in life and have money. And if you're a loser in life, then no pickup lessons may ever help you. After the graduation, the situation got worse. Due to an error in the mail, I accidentally sent my letter to college later than needed, and I risked being left without any studies. So half of the summer passed for me in the anxiety and screaming what a terrible loser I was. You can understand now that you can't have a good job without an education. They won't even take you at Starbucks. You're only going to be a cleaner there. So my desperation had some background. It was especially disappointing that for all the years of my studies, I managed to have the best academic score and take a grant for a scholarship. But it worked only for 1 year, and then everything ended. Of course, I could take a student loan in a bank, but that's a straight path to debt. But when the letter from the college came, me and my parents were on seventh heaven. Me, because I now had the place to get a higher education, and that luck hasn't turned its back on me. My parents, because they already couldn't stand looking at my sad face. Even the hints that some guys my age already pay for their own housing, and that I need some space for my personal life did not work. Now, don't get me wrong, my parents love me. I'm just useless in the real world. Well, it's just the way it is, and they knew this very well. And they thought if the chick was already thrown out of the nest, then it would fly. Such a metaphor, you know? But then I was admitted to college. The invitation letter was in my hands, and my departure was about to start just the other day, but life threw me another surprise. An official letter of apology came from the college. Somehow, it turned out there were no places in the students' dorms. They even promised me some compensation, and as soon as a place for me appeared, they would immediately give it to me. But at that moment, I had nowhere to live. It was sad. I just chose a college from those in the neighboring state, and I could not just come in the morning to study from my parents' home. It takes 6 hours to get there if you go by car, and as you understand, I did not earn enough money to pay for the housing. Me and my parents thought for a long time. We had a scandal. It even came to the point that I was not going anywhere this year and had to work at McDonald's or Starbucks. But Dad said ever since my birth, he had been saving money for my studies. And since I was smart enough and got a scholarship, this money could be spent on my housing. We had almost no time, as I screwed up with the deadlines for submitting the documents when the invitation came. These problems with the accommodation started, so we were looking for housing urgently. In just 2 days, we had to find something relatively decent at a low rent price. Maybe because of this rush, maybe because my name, but the strangest and the most terrible mistake in my life happened. Just like in a teen comedy, but no happy ending with me. Now, just imagine, I go into a rented apartment, and in the best traditions of nightmares, 5 beautiful girls looking at me at once. And then the scandal begins. Yeah, I don't know what kind of joke it was, but that apartment was already full of girls. And how it happened that me, the guy, got hooked up by the women's team still remains a mystery to all of us. I will repeat, perhaps my frozen, fragile appearance and neutral name confused the landlord, and he decided I was a girl. The only thing I was lucky with was that my dad paid the whole room, not a bed in the room with the roommates. Otherwise, I probably would no longer be alive. And even though he covered himself with a door, it didn't solve the main problem. Because in other rooms, in the kitchen, in the dining room, in the living room, in the bathroom, everywhere girls only. And it would be okay if everyone would be the same as Diana. But no, I don't know why the universe hates me, but the girls who became my involuntary roommates were just about to participate at a beauty contest. Blonde, brunette, red, curly, slender, with long legs and eyelashes. As if I died and ended up in my personal hell. You ask me why hell? If it looks like a paradise? You just don't know how it is to live with a constant erection. At first, the girls were shy about me. They even demanded to move somewhere, even live on the street, under the bridge. But then they realized I was harmless, and it's even fun to watch me move along. So they decided to let me live on, apparently instead of a cat. And then I felt the full power of the female friend zone. Sports suits and home dresses somehow imperceptibly gave way to the complete free outfits for me. My young ladies went out to drink coffee in very open clothing, defiled in their underwear to the bathroom, and did not pay attention to my sufferings at all. And my hormones unexpectedly caught up with me. They slept until I was 17, and then they decided at once to win back for everything. maybe they just had no reason before. Although I thought I liked Mary from the parallel grade, I was really afraid to go out the door of my room because there were a lot of girls everywhere at varying degrees of nudity. Sometimes it seemed to me there were not 5 girls there, but more. And sometimes there were really more girls there because my roommates called their girlfriends, and they were not embarrassed of the lonely and sad me either. Even in the bathroom, enemies were hiding. There was lace underwear there and all sorts of other female stuff. My face turned the color of a fire hydrant from embarrassment, and, well, other processes in my body started. After about a couple of months, I significantly pumped up my right hand. Sorry for the details, and dreamed of gouging my eyes out. And to all my requests, the girls only laughed and said I can always turn away. Yeah, from all sides, they were everywhere. After 6 months of such cruel torments, I finally moved out. Well, to be exact, I simply could not stand it anymore. I packed up my things and moved out to live in a hostel with my school friend. We shared one bed, not good living conditions, but now I had a healthy psyche. And then they finally gave me my own dorm room on campus. So my housing issue was solved, at last. But this was not the end of my story with the roommates. Having lost such a convenient roommate, the girls went sad because there was no one to take out the garbage and repair the sink and the shower. So the girls started to invite me for a cup of tea and minor repairs. I didn't refuse, because somehow I didn't know how to tell beautiful girls no. And soon I became a persona grata there, and later even a boyfriend of one of these beauties. Yeah, at first, as a gratitude for my help, one of the girls agreed to go on a date, and started seeing me as a real macho man. Later, it turned out, the most cheerful redhead girl, Ada, said she had been waiting for such happiness for a long time. 4 years have passed since then. I graduated from college and got a decent job. The girls' tips helped me to improve my looks, and I no longer scare dogs and pregnant women with my appearance. Ada is still with me. She's not my girlfriend anymore. She's my wife. To me, she's still the most cheerful girl I've ever known. And she's still walking around in our apartment in underwear, but now it doesn't scare me. Hello guys, my name's Keith, and my story shows that you should never deal with girls, because their revenge can be very painful for you and your self-esteem. I have known Kate almost since I was a kid. Our houses were opposite, so our parents often went to each other to borrow some missing stuff like a chainsaw or flour, or just to chat and have a barbecue. Our mothers had become best friends, which automatically meant that me and Kate were going to be together for a long time. At first, I did not consider her to be someone worthy of my attention. Well, I thought, as long as this girl doesn't take my toys away, I let her do whatever she wants. But already in high school, I changed my mind dramatically. Kate turned out to be a great friend, the one who always looks great, doesn't ask too many questions, and always supports my crazy ideas. We started dating, and I was kind of falling in love with her, even though I still treated her more like a friend rather than a girlfriend, honestly. Well, at 15, few people are ready for serious relationships. Besides, Kate was too independent. She never accepted any help from me. She always hit the bullies herself. Flowers, sweets, and everything that girls usually adore? Nope, she just couldn't stand it. Sometimes it seemed like she needed me simply because she liked the idea of having a boyfriend. Stupid TV shows and social media, you know? Pictures of happy relationships and stuff. I don't want you to think I'm all for feminism and stuff. I just wanted to be the right person next to her. I wanted to support her and be part of her life. I wanted to mean something to her. Click the like button and leave your comments below if you ever felt the same way about someone. And then Anne came to our class, and it got me. You see, I've never seen anyone like her before, and I was very puzzled. No, she didn't have donkey ears or a third leg, nothing like that. It's just all of the girls, including Kate, were more like friends to me. Those who you can take on a hike or take out for pizza, that's it. But Anne was different. It was so nice to see her walking down a corridor with her makeup on, with long hair and fancy pink fingernails. For all those months I've been knowing her, she never appeared in pants or jeans as I was watching her closely. We actually didn't have a school uniform, so Anne usually put beautiful knee-length dresses on, sometimes even longer. But she didn't seem to be a super shy girl. Rather, she wanted to be a girl who knew her self-worth. No need for me to describe her perfect appearance or excellent body. I guess you got it. All of the guys wanted to date her, but everyone understood only the best one could get her. Truly speaking, I was the best in our grade. No gimmicks. Well, I was the captain of the school baseball team, I was a straight-A student, and I had somewhat of an authority. And you're right, I had something that could hinder our potential happiness with Anne. Well, someone. Kate. I couldn't break up with her in any way, even considering the fact that Anne was objectively better. I had feelings for Anne, and they were getting stronger. But it wasn't the reason. The moment I saw Anne, I immediately realized Kate and I were not a couple. But our parents were very close friends, so they would not understand if we suddenly broke up. I was thinking about it over and over again, and then an insidious plan came into my head. I forgot to tell you about a small detail. Kate studied in another school, so we met up only outside or while hanging out with other friends. Otherwise, nothing would have happened. I started to hit on Anne. I started properly with flowers from the flower bed, beautiful words, and other stuff that girls like. I had to blackmail the guys a bit, so they were silent about Kate, and soon everything seemed to work out for me. Not overnight, but Anne liked me back. At first, everything was just great. A tender, fragile girl turned out to be exactly what I needed. I could feel strong next to her, brave, like a knight in shining armor. Meanwhile, my relationship with Kate was falling apart. Maybe it was all my fault, I don't know, but at some point I realized we were like rivals. She was trying to prove to be the best at everything, with me or without me. She treated me disrespectfully, like, set this down, pick that up. She didn't let me pay in the cinema, and even at baseball games, she yelled out that I was a wuss, and she would have made a better pitch. As you might think, I stopped talking to her afterwards. I tried to spend all my free time with Anne, who was just perfect for me. I even introduced them to each other. I was not worried at all. Well, because there was hardly anyone who might have thought that Kate and I were a couple. I already doubted it myself and stopped considering her my girlfriend. I had only Anne. But that decision was my worst mistake. Shortly after that meeting, I began to notice that Kate was moving away from me. If I didn't know Kate well, I would have thought she was cheating on me, because all those tricks with ignoring and distancing were not in her style, rather in mine. My girlfriend couldn't cheat on me, right? So I decided to act like a real man, to forget about her. Moreover, Anne began to demand more attention from me. I guess I finally made a choice in that moment and started spending all my free time with her. But instead of a little appreciation, Anne, for some reason, started showing dissatisfaction. I hoped to conquer her with my fearlessness and stuff like that. I tried to be reliable and loyal, but Anne suddenly became angry with me. It was not joy or contentment anyways. She certainly smiled at me first, saying she was insanely happy I managed to come, but then she changed her behavior completely. So one day, her phone suddenly became unavailable. In fact, I faced the same thing with Kate. Dropped calls, unanswered texts, pointless excuses, and so on. And then it hit me. It was so insulting that words can't describe what I felt in that moment. I was kind of presumptuous and immediately understood what it was all about. Both of my girls simultaneously broke up with me, but I had no idea what those little bastards had kept for dessert. After a while, strange photos came into my mail. Kate and Anne are involved in some kind of girly activities like shopping around or chatting over a cup of coffee. The pics didn't seem to be weird as they knew each other and kept in touch, and I was aware of it. The weirdest thing was seeing Kate holding Anne's hand in front of the cafe, and Anne straightens the scarf on Kate, or watching their hands meet over a sugar bowl. Separately, those details were not worth any attention, but if you put all the pictures in one, it immediately became clear that there was something between the two of them. But I had no wish to know anything about that something in both my exes. Until recently, I could not believe Kate and Anne had, let's call it, something. I didn't want to accept that so hard that I looked through the last pictures with horror and sweaty palms. And now, after 2 months of a constant and annoying online show, my mail turned out to be the last, but obviously not the least. The photo of Anne and Kate having a French kiss with an inscription, "If you want to know the truth, come," with an address and a date. Certainly, I went. I was not so much interested as much as I really wanted to look into their eyes and speak out. The fact they had pulled it off behind me, it was really offensive. I wasn't stupid, but that was exactly how I felt at that moment. I imagined what would come, yell and blame them for leaving me without explanations. I even thought about making a spectacular public scene out there. Because it's one side when you argue and make a scandal, but it's another thing when you team up and play against me together. It was really insulting, despite of the fact that it was me who started the lie to me game. But still, the girls were waiting for me in a cafe, holding their hands. All of a sudden, I realized it was not a window dressing. They really seemed to feel comfortable with each other. Their faces beamed, and in the way they looked at each other was something overwhelming for me. Kate and Anne told me everything. As I already realized at that moment, it was so foolish to hope that the girls that were always in touch would not guess that their boyfriend was actually one and the same person. It was quite easy to find out. Few talks were enough for common ground. They were very offended and very angry at first, but then they discussed it more carefully with each other and decided to teach me a lesson. And then the initial motive of an insidious revenge, backed by all that "let's try, why not," and "yeah, that's my baby," was followed by the other ordinary desire. I'm talking about sex, for sure. But apparently, they could not leave me without a lesson. So in order to finish the plan successfully, they started hugging and kissing in public places and sending those amazing photos to me. Just to be sure I know about them, I understand that there's no more place for me in their lives, and I'm hurt. I couldn't even quarrel with them properly because, well, it was clear that they felt really good with each other. So I learned a lesson of not dating two girls at once and always being honest. I think they have a beautiful future ahead of them. I hope they will be fine, really. Now I'm free, with a new life experience behind me. There will be a time when I have such a relationship where I'll be completely happy.
Hey everybody, my name's Irene, and my story is a real trash. If it didn't happen to me, I would have never believed it. Alas, my reality is kind of a cheap Indian TV series. At 18, I faced a challenging dilemma: continue my studies or give it up and start working. But how could one choose anything here? Of course, I needed to study, but my parents went bankrupt, and they couldn't continue paying for my college. So I had to find a way to quickly get some big bucks. At first, I honestly tried to earn some extra money, but all sorts of small earnings didn't bring me even one step closer to the amount I needed. So I had to look for more creative ways. There were 3 of them, but I immediately rejected the first one because prostitution isn't my thing. The second one was to take part in experimental scientific research and get paid. Yeah, it was more fun, but somehow I was confused by the fact that all the participants had to sign papers about voluntary consent and risks. Like, if something goes wrong, they don't owe me anything? Or what? No, sir, I still need my health, and I don't want to walk around with donkey ears or 1 kidney at 18. Well, not a fancy entertainment, I suppose. And then, when I was frankly on the edge, My roommate came to college with a belly. It was just out of the blue, because as far as I knew, she didn't even have a boyfriend. But I was too shy to come up and ask, because someone else's reproductive system was none of my business. However, I was able to see enough of how our teachers fussed over her and gave her good grades for the tests automatically, just not to worry the pregnant woman. That's where the third option appeared. Well, from the outside, it was the craziest one, but also the one with the highest bonus, if you can say that. Surrogate maternity. This is when a healthy young girl carries a baby for a childless couple and gets paid for it. Well, usually with big money, and then depends on what you agree on. It seemed to me that this was the coolest way to get the money. And I would also help people, and I wouldn't hurt myself either. So I rushed to our local reproductive center to check in for the surrogacy program. I must say, I love kids, but I also knew I was going to become just a vessel for someone else's kid. And yeah, I was fine with that one. A nice couple who had problems with conceiving quickly picked me. The woman showed her medical records where it was written something about the pipes obstruction and the inability to conceive. But the man was fine. They both badly wanted kids. But this man was totally against taking a kid from the orphanage because, I quote, he was not sure he could love a stranger kid. After the interview, I decided to help them. Well, they both looked nice. You could see that they had had this idea long enough to understand that they really needed it, and not just because of a sudden impulse of the heart. That was important, because I wouldn't want the kid to end up with people who can't give him everything he needed. Besides, they were well off. Even more than that, they had a great house in the most prestigious area of the city. They both worked, but the wife worked just for fun, and she admitted that she wanted to plunge into baby care. And they really loved each other, not for showing off. They had such little things, like adjusting the wife's slipping shawl and immediately kissing her shoulder, or silently bending down and adjusting the husband's shoelace. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, when I realized there couldn't be better parents for the kid, we signed a contract. The procedure itself looked like a regular appointment with a gynecologist. I went in, sat down, I was injected with a drug, and they told me to wait. 2 weeks later, I went for an ultrasound, and the doc said the embryo had been successfully developed. Then he called my couple and told them the wonderful news. The Smiths, it's not their real name, immediately started to fuss over me, as if I were a crystal vase. First, they immediately rushed to the hospital and started to squeeze me and touch my belly, probably hoping to feel some mystical connection. In fact, according to the ultrasound, there was an embryo just a couple of inches in size there, and I still didn't feel anything, but okay. Secondly, they told me in a commander's voice I would no longer stay in a college dorm. I didn't give up my studies. It was stated in the contract. And they bought me a studio apartment. It was very nice and bright in a house near the campus. They also wanted a car with a driver so that I wouldn't feel stressed, but there was really just 5 minutes of a slow walk to get to my college. And walking is good for the health of a pregnant woman, so I refused. I started to receive weekly envelopes with food for money and my needs, though the future mother herself chose my menu, and every morning she sent boxes with my daily meals. That is, in fact, she paid money for the food. By the way, she was a great cook. When my belly started growing, we signed up for all sorts of health programs for pregnant women and future mothers. I also went there, though I knew I wasn't supposed to raise the kid. Well, just for the future, in case me and my future husband needed it. I wouldn't have enough money to pay for private lessons with a top nanny and a nurse. At college, everyone treated me with a great understanding. I honestly thought many people would condemn me for my decision to give the kid to a family, because I had already heard phrases like, "You're not a woman, you're a cuckoo bird," and it was no use to explain my thing for the baby was only the uterus. Everything else belonged to other people. Surprisingly, the teachers were very open people, and many of them supported me during such a difficult time. Anyway, I went pot-bellied and enjoyed my life. I solved my money problem. I paid for college. The only thing left was to give birth to a healthy baby and things would be all right. I thought so. By the way, my pregnant body behaved just fine. Nothing hurt. It didn't pull. I didn't even have toxicosis. Anyway, I could easily be put in a perfect motherhood textbook. From the 3rd trimester until the birth of the kid, the Smiths never left me alone. They took me to the seaside, took care of my nutrition and health, and did everything to make the baby inside me happy. Even the father-to-be would spend hours stroking my stomach and listening to the baby pushing inside. A perfect life, yeah. The birth itself was also 5 stars. The Smiths chose partner births, and they were personally present at the birth of their first kid. An hour after the start, I gave birth to a charming little girl of 6 pounds and 27 inches. She had a fancy blonde forelock on the top of her head and large blue eyes. They paid for the recovery room and then offered me a choice. I can stay as a nurse for the baby, Alex, or my baby would immediately be taken away for artificial feeding and I'd never see her again. I chose the second option. Don't get me wrong, I was 18, and just by looking into the eyes of the baby, I felt something was waking up inside me, probably a mother's instinct. I'm in terrible pain right now, and what if I agreed to feed her? Yeah, I wouldn't give it to anyone later. No matter how many times you're gonna say these are not my genes. At this point, I said goodbye to the Smiths and baby Alex forever. I went through the treatment until the end, received a money transfer to my bank account in an amount 2 times exceeding the agreed-upon one, and I got back to my normal life. There was nothing to remind me I used to have a kid in me. By the way, they also left me an apartment, as gratitude for my excellent job. In fact, I got a lot more than I planned, and although a slight sadness was with me, I knew that Alex was in hands of reliable, loving, and real parents. Over the next 2 years, I finished my studies, got a job, and got things settled in my life. I was even happy, and the thoughts about the kid slowly faded away. I was sure Alex was all right. I must confess, about 6 months later, I personally checked. I went over to the Smiths' house, and I was satisfied with what I saw. And I didn't expect that one warm summer morning, I wouldn't see the postman with my bills on the doorstep, but a little blonde girl instead, who stood there alone, holding a letter in her hands. This was a mistake. I'm sorry, but Alex wasn't what our family needed. The kid turned out to be unsuccessful. She cried at night, refused to eat, and spoiled the furniture. It's your fault. Your genes ruined our daughter. We don't demand a refund, but we don't want to keep Alex anymore. Sorry and goodbye. That's what was in that awful letter. I was in complete shock. So these perfect people just threw the kid out of their home, without belongings and documents, just for ruining their furniture and crying? What kind of nightmare is this? Of course, I immediately went to the police, but the Smiths weren't to be found. They sold their house and apparently went to another country. The police offered to take Alex to a shelter, but I refused. The police helped me drop the documents for Alex, where my information was stated in the column Mother. I put my best friend as her father. We started living together. Yeah, it was insanely difficult, especially at first, because I had a job, my own schedule, and here's a kid who has no belongings, no health insurance, nothing. I often cried at night, but I never thought of giving Alex away. And we did it, through pain, depression, and hardship, thanks to the people who supported us. In the end, the police found the Smiths, and they were put behind bars. They were obliged to pay me and Alex child support. Now Alex is 3. She's a charming, kind, and very sympathetic kid. I'm very happy this whole story did not affect her wonderful character. Yeah, sometimes she cries. Sometimes she's naughty and tries to draw on the wallpaper. But she's just a kid. And sometimes she just needs a hug to calm down. Yeah, I didn't plan to become a mother, and I knew perfectly well that I wouldn't give birth to a kid for myself. But life decided to make a surprise for me. Do I regret it? I don't know. I really love my baby, and I consider her to be my own daughter because she lived inside me. and now I can't imagine how it is when she's not there. I can't leave her in kindergarten for a long time because I miss her madly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob. There's a special thing about me I can't get rid of. I'm very curious, but oftentimes it's a curse to me or my friends. For example, me and my friend decided to check out whether a person is really able to swallow a light bulb. Eventually, as you may guess, our experiment ended up in the hospital. Because only doctors could get the light bulb back from my friend's mouth. Another thing happened when my curiosity led me to keep an eye on our neighbor. His behavior seemed suspicious to me. Well, he always left home early and returned late. In the evenings, I heard some terrifying screams from his garage. However, he was not a horror fan, and I ended up in the police station because a neighbor wrote a police report saying I was stalking him all the time. The reason why I want to tell you this story today is also my curiosity. I was involved in a kind of dubious adventure, and I can't tell my friends or my family about it right now. Luckily, with this YouTube channel, I can do it in an anonymous way. But my sister knows everything. Well, she took an active part in the whole process. Okay, first things first. I have a very ordinary family. Mom, dad, older sister, and me. We live in a big house. Me and my sister have rooms next to each other on the second floor. So we often fight if one of us is listening to music or watching a movie on a loud volume, or if we invite large companies of friends over to hang. My sister Alice is almost 4 years older than me. Of course, she often uses it to make me do some small chores around the house or run to the store to buy something. But on the whole, we live quite peacefully, trying not to interfere in each other's life. Alice goes to university, and about 6 months ago, she got a boyfriend. His name is Troy. They had only started dating, but Alice brought him to our house almost immediately and introduced him to our parents. Of course, they liked him. A smart guy, studying economics, preparing to be a future businessman, a promising fiance, as my mom told Sis. To me, he was just a normal guy. Cheerful, sociable, and stuff. We even hung out together a couple of times, playing video games. But we rarely crossed paths in general. So we weren't exactly friends. But it all started, as I said, with my curiosity. One day, I noticed Alice was returning home with a large number of packages from different stores, and some of them had logos of quite famous and recognizable brands. And the purchases clearly didn't come cheap for my sister. But where did she get the money? She told her parents she found a cool part-time job near the university and saved up for a while to afford these purchases. Our parents praised her and asked no more questions, but I knew there was no part-time job. Something was wrong. I always came home in the afternoon, after school and my basketball practice, and my sister was always home by then, and most often with her boyfriend. But my mom and dad, of course, were still at work at the time, so they did not doubt her words. At first, I thought Troy had paid for all of my sister's purchases. Maybe he was one of those rich guys who flushed their parents' money. But according to his social media accounts, his family was quite an ordinary one. Then they both got the latest iPhones. I got even more curious. I could hear them talking loudly, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Though I must admit, I tried to eavesdrop on them a couple of times. There were a lot of options in my head. Maybe they earn money on the internet, or they have some part-time job, but not very legal and connected with, let's just say, with certain entertainments. Why not? But in this case, they would never spend all their evenings at home. They would instead... One day, me and my friends were walking after school. We were about to go to the movie theater. There was still 1 hour before the movie, so we sat in a cafe waiting for the start. While my pals were ordering food, I was looking out the window, and to my surprise, I noticed Troy standing at a small shop opposite. I was about to wave to him, but I changed my mind at the last moment. Then some adult man came up to Troy and said something to him. Troy handed him a small package. The man, in turn, handed him the envelope and immediately walked away. Troy also hurried away to the subway. What the heck? In the evening, I decided I had to find out what my sister and her boyfriend were really doing to get money. I started with the simplest method. I decided to eavesdrop on what they were talking about in my sister's room. Alice and Troy were locked in my sister's room as usual. I could hear their voices behind the wall, so I decided I could try to put my plan into action. I went quietly to the door, put my ear to it, and listened. As luck would have it, our parents' TV was on downstairs, and there was some music in Alice's room. But I still managed to hear a few snatches of words that made me even more confused. The client was satisfied. We need a good photo on the website. Let's double the price. Admittedly, I did not complain about my memory, so just in a few seconds, I realized the client was that man. Suddenly, the door opened, and I couldn't resist falling right at my sister's feet. "My God, Jacob, are you spying on us or what?" she exclaimed. Immediately, she pulled me into a room and locked the door. I realized that I was in deep trouble. They sat me down in a chair and stood opposite me. I was getting prepared for a scandal, but my sister's words really surprised me. She said, "Oh, it's good you came. I was just about to suggest you join us." "Join? What do you mean? Really, join what?" There were so many questions in my head, and then I looked at my sister's bed and saw it was covered with women's underwear. What the heck is going on here? This was the question I asked Alice and Troy. They were amused at first, following my gaze, but then they show all the aces. Well, I must say, I looked very shocked. Anyway, it turns out that my sister and her boyfriend make a living by selling her underwear online. But thing was, this was the underwear she had already worn for a day at least. Or better, 2 days. They made it on a bet, and then uploaded the first products online. Much to their surprise, someone immediately purchased it for several $100s, and they realized they found a gold mine. Troy uploaded her underwear on a website that he created specifically for this purpose. Alice took beautiful photos of herself to prove this underwear really belongs to her. Then, somewhere in the city, Troy met with customers and distributed purchases. Within a couple of months, their income was thousands of dollars in total, and they realized that it was time to expand the business. Troy didn't have time for anything, and they needed a reliable person to meet customers. They unanimously decided it should be me, but they had no idea how to suggest it. And then I fell at their feet with my own curiosity. Of course, this business was questionable, but when they told me about my share, I promptly agreed with no hesitation. I've been working as a courier for a month now. My task is very simple. At an arranged time and place, I meet customers and silently pass them the goods and get an envelope from them. I spend 2 to 3 hours on this after school, and I get such an amount that many at my age could not even dream of. Of course, now I can't show off my wealth in front of my pals or buy something expensive because my parents will definitely notice it, but I don't regret anything. I'm saving up for a car that I'll definitely buy after I finish school. In addition, I can always treat my friends in a cafe or spend some money on entertainment. So I'm happy to be the third man in this successful business with my sister and her boyfriend. What would you do if you were me? Would you accept the offer? Or would you say it's morally wrong? Write your answers in the comments below this video.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm 14 and I'm a girl. Yes, you got me right. I'm really a girl, even though I totally look like a boy. Ask me why I look like this. Actually, this story is a little romantic and a little silly. If you watch this video to the end, you'll definitely find out why you should never repeat my mistake. It all started with the fact that I fell in love, like all the girls my age. And, of course, he was the one and only person I planned to marry, have kids, and be together until death do us part. I saw him at a football game. You see, I've been very fond of this game ever since I was a kid. It so happened that when I was little, my dad often took me to watch football matches with him. I'm used to the stadium, the shouting, the crowd watching the ball moving back and forth. So later, I had no doubts what sport to choose when I was a teenager. Definitely football won my heart, and I joined a football team. I was often told that this thing is not for girls. However, we had a rather strong women's football team in our city, with a coach who even once played for the national team. I liked training, I liked matches, I liked scoring goals. Well, I was a striker in my team, and of course, I still loved going to matches and watching professionals playing. My close friend's boyfriend also played football, so we often hung out in the stands of a small stadium, supporting him and his team. At one of these games, I saw Max, the guy I fell in love with at first sight. Tall, dark hair, perfect shape. It's like he just stepped right out of my dreams. He was playing for a rival team, so Finn, my friend's boyfriend, probably didn't know him. But I decided I'd find him after the game anyway. After I bombarded him with a dozen questions, Finn just sent me to Max's Facebook page. Well, like, you need him, so find out everything about your crush yourself. They say all the girls are natural-born spies, so it's not surprising after a couple of hours I knew not only what school he goes to and who his friends are, but also how long he's been playing football and whether he has a girlfriend. The girl, by the way, wasn't there. I followed his Instagram and watched his life in silence to find out where he was. I hoped that one day, as if by chance, I would cross paths with him in my favorite coffee shop or in the movie theater. But this Max was quite a disciplined and serious guy, so he was only at school, at training, and at games. And where am I supposed to meet him? No one will let me into someone else's school. I won't be able to attract his attention during the match either. First, he's probably always focused on the game. And second, I would look pretty stupid shouting his name from the half-empty stands. Training was the only way out. But how can a girl get to the guy's training? And as soon as I asked myself this question, I immediately remembered one of the movies that I loved so much as a kid. She is a Man. In this movie, the girl pretends to be a guy, her brother, to play football. I can do that too. I could easily pretend to be a guy, because my figure allowed me to do this without arousing any suspicion. So, the plan was to try to get into the same team as Max, get close to him, become friends, and then, well, somehow tell him that I'm a girl and I plan to marry him. The plan may not have been so perfect, but that time it seemed almost genius to me, and I couldn't wait to bring it to life. I only told a close friend about my intention to become a boy for a while. Of course, she twisted her finger at her temple, but at my request, she brought her brother's things so that I could change and go to the selection for Max's team. There were no difficulties with my hair either. I bought a wig, made a casual male haircut with slightly elongated hair. Anyway, in men's clothing, with the right hairstyle and without makeup, I really could pass for a guy. The next step in my plan was to qualify for the men's soccer team. There was no fear here either. I was always a great player, and sometimes scored such fancy goals the guys would only dream of. Anyway, I found out when the team would have a new set, signed up for a trial training session, and waited for a meeting with my beloved Max. The only thing I wasn't ready for was the men's locker room. It was a shock for me. Loud conversations, laughter, clothes and socks scattered all over the room, and a terrible smell of sweat. I almost got swept back out the door. It was only the smile of Max, who was talking to another guy about something, that made me go inside to implement my plan to the end. During the trial training, I gave 100% of my best. I ran around the field like lightning, showed feints that I could do, and literally shot the opponent's goal. I needed a place on this team, and I got what I wanted. My game impressed the coach, and he personally told me that he would be happy to see a striker like me on his team. I was in seventh heaven from such happiness. But as it turned out, in the locker room, my game impressed not only the coach, but also Max, who came up to me to meet me and tell me that at last there was a player on the team with whom he could build great connections and work together in the attack. I had a lot of trouble not giving myself away as a girl in love and talking to Max the way a guy would. I'm not sure what I did, because a compliment made me blush. for all my love-filled euphoria, I didn't take into account one important point. After training, I always ran to the shower first. But how do I do this in the men's locker room? I can't undress in front of everyone. By the way, the guys on this occasion didn't have a complex at all. They left things in their lockers and went to the shower. My eyes were definitely not ready for this. I thought I'd burn with shame. As a result, on the first day after talking to Max, I quickly ran out of the locker room, shouting I was late for classes and I didn't have any time for a shower. I've already seen too much that I shouldn't have, but I had to get used to it. Due to the fact that the training schedule in the women's and men's football teams almost completely coincided, I had to leave the women's team, with which I played for almost 4 years. Probably someone would say this is stupid to screw up your football mates like this because of some guy. But then the prospect of gaining playing experience in the men's team seemed an attractive option to me, and I didn't regret anything. I joined the active training process on the new team. Once I solved the problem with the shower, I pretended I was always going to take a long shower, waited, and when everyone left, I hid in one of the booths. Of course, my excessive shyness became an occasion for harsh jokes from the guys. They suggested I was embarrassed to go naked in front of them because I was quite modest below the waist. But I just laughed with them, trying to avoid a direct excuse. My relationship with Max developed rapidly. Well, if you can call a relationship a conversation between two guys. He actively interacted with me on the field, asking for advice about a particular strategy of the game. And after training, we often walked together to the bus stop or went to a cafe to eat before school. Even on Max's social media, I realized he was a serious guy and doesn't go anywhere except school and training. But in person, I found out that in general, nothing else is interesting to him. He doesn't listen to music, doesn't watch movies, and rarely goes out with friends. When he has a free moment, he either watches the games of professional teams or trains in the backyard of his house. His whole life was football and nothing else. I must admit that it upset me a little. What was there to talk to him about? Even if he considered relationships with girls a waste of time. I found out about it by accident. The men's locker room was stressful for me, not only because of the abundance of naked men's bodies, but also because of the conversations of the guys themselves. It was often vulgar jokes, discussing girls not from the most pleasant sides, talking about who, when, and with whom had it, and all that stuff. And in one of these conversations, Max said he generally believes all girls are stupid and dumb, and relationships with them are just a waste of time. His words stung me. Turned out that I was suffering for nothing all this time. I shouldn't have tried to be a good friend to him. I shouldn't have. And then I realized that I just didn't know how to tell him I was actually a girl. A stupid girl in love with him. He'll laugh at me right away and won't even listen to me. My whole plan now seemed like complete nonsense. I left the women's club, and even though I like to play on the men's team, sooner or later, at the medical examination, for example, everyone will find out that I'm a girl, and then I'll have to justify myself not to Max, but to the coach. Anyway, I don't know what to do, and I really need your advice. Can you tell me what I should do? Tell the coach and the team the truth and leave in disgrace? Or go back to my women's team in silence and forget about this stupid act forever? Write your answers in the comments below. Hello everyone, my name's Emily, and the story I want to tell you today still gives me shivers and goosebumps all over my body. Have you ever met someone who looks exactly like you? Have you ever talked to someone who looks at you with your own eyes, speaks with your voice, and smiles with your smile? This is really creepy. And no, I didn't meet my twin who was separated from me when we were kids. I met my clone. Where did it come from? I'll tell you. It all started when I met Alex at some party. This guy immediately caught my attention. He clearly stood out from the crowd. Good-looking, catchy, and laughing loudly, with a great sense of humor and charisma. I spent the evening looking at him. I was jealous of other girls with whom he talked to and danced. And then one of my friends introduced us. We quickly found a common language and exchanged contacts so that we could continue communicating after the party. I can't say I was counting on anything, but who am I lying to? Of course I did. So I was very happy when the next day he texted me and invited me for a walk. Of course I agreed. And as they say, I flew to him on the wings of love. And then our relationship started developing, like in the most beautiful movies. Night walks, dates in an amusement park, flowers. We spent every spare moment together. I was so in love. And Alex loved me back. Everyone said what a beautiful couple we are. I even introduced Alex to my parents because I was sure he was my destiny and we would be together for the rest of our lives. But only a year passed and serious problems started. We both graduated from high school, then we went to the same university, but we studied in different departments. We were preparing to live in a student dorm, but our parents, after discussing everything, decided they would help us to rent our own apartment. So we started living together. And no, the problem started not because of any everyday issues, but because I realized there was way too much Alex in my life. We lived together, we went to the university and back together, and always spent time together during breaks. I didn't pay attention to it, but I suddenly realized that in the year I was dating Alex, I stopped communicating with almost all of my friends. All my free time was given to him, and he was very offended. Even if I said I needed to spend the evening with my family because we were having a family holiday, but I was in love. And of course, the last thing I wanted was for us to fight. So I always went to meet him. The only time we were apart was during my classes. Only there could I communicate with my classmates and devote time to my interests. But even then, after a while, he started to control me. He texted me all the time, asked how I was doing, said he missed me. Of course, I was very happy that my boyfriend loved me so much, but I started to feel that my freedom was severely restricted, as if my life didn't belong to me anymore. The first serious argument we had was when I bought a new phone and refused to tell Alex the password for it. After all, I should have my own life, right? I started talking to my friends again, and we discussed various topics. You know, just our women's conversations. Why would he read that? But Alex was really angry. He shouted I was hiding something from him, or even cheating on him. I had to show all my active chats to him to cool him down. But even then, I thought it was a bit humiliating. Why should I make excuses? His control got more and more intrusive. It got to the point that in his spare time, he started to go with me to my classes. I felt very stupid. And one day, I decided it was time for us to have a serious conversation. I honestly told Alex I wasn't happy with his behavior. I was offended by his distrust and the restrictions of my personal time. And do you know what excuse he found for himself? He said he loved me so much that he was afraid I would find someone else and leave him. But what Alex didn't want to understand was that the way he was acting was pushing us further apart. One day, I couldn't stand it. I packed my things and said I would stay with a friend of mine for a couple of days and think about what to do with our relationship next. Of course, I expected him to be very angry, but he was so mad that he almost hit me. After that, I didn't want to stay in the same apartment with him for even a minute. It was naive of me to think that Alex would calm down. He harassed me at the university, begged me to go back to him, and even cried. I was bored, but I knew it was time to end this toxic relationship. Then he suddenly disappeared. He stopped calling, texting, and following me around the university. I even started to worry, but I didn't dare call him myself. A week or two later, I received a very strange message from a friend. She asked me in surprise why I went back to Alex after everything that had happened. I was just as surprised and told her that I hadn't thought about going back to him, but she insisted that she saw me with him half an hour ago in the city park. It was strange. A little later, another friend of mine said that she saw us in a movie theater, and surprisingly, Alex's mom called me and said yesterday, when I was visiting them, I left my gloves in the hallway. But how is this possible? I haven't spoken to Alex almost in a month. He didn't even respond to my messages, although I wrote more than once, because I had to pick up my personal belongings from the apartment. I found out the shocking truth quite unexpectedly. The thing is, I have a rare allergy to odors, and not all perfumes are suitable for me. But one day, I accidentally came across a small French perfume shop where I was able to pick up a fragrance, and since then, I have only bought it there. This time, I also went there, but the seller, who already knew me personally, was very surprised, saying I came over a couple of days ago and bought 2 packages of perfume, and I was with my boyfriend. I decided this couldn't continue anymore, so I went to the apartment where Alex and I used to live together. Not daring to use my key, I knocked, heard footsteps, and then the door opened. For about 10 seconds, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. I just couldn't utter a single word. I was standing in front of me, the hairstyle, eye color, the mole under my lower lip, manicure, even my favorite home outfit. It was my clone. The clone, on the other hand, didn't seem to be surprised to see me at all. She even grinned and waved her hair, but it was my smile and my habit of pushing back my hair. I thought I was going crazy. How is this possible? Oh, what's going on here? The clone broke the silence first, introducing herself as Amelie. At least her name was different. She invited me into the apartment. There, everything remained in its place. It was as if I hadn't left at all, and we were still living like a happy couple in love. Although Alex continued, not with me, but with Amelie. I still didn't know what to say, but the clone took the initiative here and decided to tell me everything herself. It turned out that Amelie, which by the way is her real name, had been in love with Alex since high school. She ran after him, tried to attract his attention, but in vain. He fell in love with me. We started dating, and then we left our hometown and started living together. Amelie didn't lose hope, and also moved to another university. She constantly reminded him of herself, wrote messages with words of love. Wow, I didn't know he had a fan, but that's not the point now. When I left, Alex couldn't accept the loss and decided that if I didn't want to be with him, then he would create his own Emily. He called Amelie, who had been in love with him for a long time, and asked her to become me. I know it sounds crazy, but it was true. They changed her hair, bought colored lenses for her eyes, and our shapes were already similar. Makeup, a few cosmetic procedures. Ta-da! Even our own mothers couldn't distinguish us now. Amelie was telling me all this, and I didn't want to believe what she was saying. Was it really possible? And Alex created my personal clone, who will always be there for him and won't leave him, even if he acts like the most jealous boyfriend in the world. Amelie said that everything suits her, and she's happy she can finally be with the one she loves. I didn't understand her, and I didn't want to. I thought maybe I should talk to Alex, but why? Things are clear with him. I took my things and tried to forget about Alex and this Amelie, who was willing to live a different life just to be with him. It's been a long time, but I still shiver when I remember how I met my own clone. Sometimes I even have nightmares. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Maybe I should have talked to Alex and found out his motives personally. I will be glad to hear your advice and comments. Hi everyone, my name's Ruby. Tell me, do you often quarrel with your parents? Do you fight about something with them? Do you always do what they think is right and good for you? I never had such problems until recently. Things have totally changed after my parents forced me to do something I still hate to think about. Watch this video to the end to know why it's sometimes important to defend your point of view when disputing with your parents, instead of blindly following their instructions. To start with, my parents are businessmen. Even when I was away, my dad and mom decided to open their own hotel business. They had a dream to create a chain of top-class hotels all over the country. Of course, they started with a small home-like hotel, but thanks to my mom's economic education and my dad's hand of steel and business talent, 5 years later they opened a full-fledged hotel, which was considered one of the best in our city. When I started school, it was already a chain of 5 hotels that my parents took care of as if they were their kids too, like me. Since my parents' business was successful, they could afford to send me to an elite school instead of a regular one. They were mostly the kids of the same businessmen, the kids of politicians, or famous people, and even the kids of show business stars who studied there. There was even the son of a famous actor in this school. Anyway, I joined the top of society. The Golden Kids. That's what our teachers called us behind our backs. Of course, it's believed that the higher the status of parents is, the more disgusting the character of their kid would be. But we didn't have such kids in our class. We were always very friendly to each other, despite the fact there were many different companies in our class. New students often showed up at our school. This was always of great interest. For a while, every corner of the school was full of whispers, discussions, and rumors about what the new guy or girl was like. And in our senior year, we also had a new student. His name was Paul. For some reason, everyone didn't like him at first. You know, sometimes you look at a person and you realize that you don't like him or her, and Paul proved to us that our first impressions were true. We were always happy to welcome new guys, quickly introduce them to our things, told them what was going on and so on, but Paul immediately refused someone's help. He looked at us as if we weren't worthy of his attention, and only distracted him from some very important affairs. After trying to make contact with him a couple of times, we all gave up on it. We decided if he decided to be condescending to us, we would be ready to help him in some way. But with this behavior, the last thing we wanted to do was be kind and polite to him. Of course, the main question was, who were his parents? He acted like some descendant of the royal family, not less. There were even some thoughts he was somehow connected with the presidential family, or that his parents were the shareholders in some billion-dollar company. But hey, his name would have been widely known in that case, right? So, who was Paul in fact? No one would have dared to ask him directly about his family. So we just tried to collect some information about Paul piece by piece. We watched the car that brought him to classes, looked out who sees him off and meets him after school. Anyway, we spied on him. But even a month later, we still didn't find out who his parents were. All of a sudden, my own dad and mom shed the light on this mystery. The next step in the development of their business was the introduction of luxury restaurants and hotels. They dreamed that every building would have an expensive and sophisticated restaurant with a kitchen to suit every taste, and the tables there would be reserved for a month in advance. And then, one day at breakfast, they shared with me that very soon, they would have a meeting with a very famous and cool restaurateur. The contract with him would bring their hotels to the next level, getting them closer to their long-desired 5 stars. They casually mentioned the name of this restaurateur, and I realized that it somehow sounded familiar to me. For a long time, I tried to figure out where I heard it, and then I realized that my new classmate had the same last name. So, bingo! Our Paul was the son of the owner of a chain of elite restaurants. I imagined how happy I would be to share this news at school with everyone. This will definitely be discussed all day long, or even a week. So, we discussed this hot news and calmed down. Paul still didn't talk to anyone, and over time, we started to avoid him. My parents rarely took me with them to their business meetings, but sometimes, nevertheless, it was necessary to show up in front of business partners, making an image of a perfect family. My mom chose an insanely expensive dress for me, took me to the beauty salon to get me prepared for the evening, taught me how to behave, and how to properly maintain a conversation in the top society, where we would find ourselves. So, it was the day. I rose early, went shopping, then to the beauty salon, then to the restaurant. My mom told me we were having dinner with the family of the restaurateur. I was already looking forward to seeing Paul's haughty and disdainful look even on my day off. Not a big pleasure, huh? In contrast to their son, Mr. and Mrs. Collins were surprisingly pleasant and positive people. They talked to my parents not only about their work, but also about their hobbies, mutual acquaintances, and events they had attended. When they started discussing Paul and me, both sides were surprised to learn that we were not just in the same school, but in the same class. Mrs. Collins kindly asked me to look after their son at school, to help him adapt, because for a month, he didn't make a single friend. I wonder why, Mrs. Collins. But of course, I didn't tell her that. I just nodded my head politely. The dinner went very well, but at home, I suddenly had a serious conversation with my parents. They scolded me for not telling them I was in the same class with Paul Collins. I justified myself by saying I didn't think this information was particularly important to them, but Mom and Dad thought otherwise. In their opinion, my friendship with Paul could significantly influence a positive decision of the Collins family to do business together. I had to tell them the truth about Paul's behavior, how contemptuous he was of everyone around him, and how we all reciprocated. My parents listened to me and said we would return to this conversation in the morning. But what else was there to talk about? In the morning, I had a surprise waiting for me. During the night, my parents came up with something that I still blame them for. They said I had to make friends with Paul Collins, whether I want to or not. Not just make friends, but become his girlfriend, so that the Collinses would start to see me and my family as a future part of their own. I couldn't believe my ears. I thought this only happened in books and movies. This typical plot when parents force their daughter to enter into a relationship with a rich heir of another family seemed absolutely unreal for real life. But Mom and Dad weren't kidding. Every evening they asked me what the progress was in my relationship with Paul, and I didn't have any success, just because I didn't want to communicate with him and had no idea how to even approach him. Then my parents started to blackmail me, saying if I didn't meet their requirements, they would block my credit card and send me to a regular school. They just left me no choice. I needed something to start my relationship with Paul, so I signed up for the same extra class as he did. He always sat next to me, so that we would be in the same group for our joint projects. One of these projects was a pair project, so for almost 2 weeks we met after classes in the library. It's not that Paul's personality has changed dramatically, but at least he stopped looking at me with that disdainful look. Even sometimes we started conversations on some abstract topics, and he often talked about our classmates, making fun of their shortcomings. To keep up the conversation, I had to pretend that I thought the same about everyone, but many of them were my friends, and at such moments I felt like I was betraying them. By the way, due to the fact I started to spend a lot of time with Paul, many of my friends stopped talking to me. They thought I was just as naughty and proud as he was. I couldn't tell them the truth. After about a couple of months of such dense communication, Paul suggested dating to me. He said compared to everyone else, I was a good option, and he already got used to me. Yeah, not the most romantic confession of feelings. I agreed. My parents were in seventh heaven. Of course, they got their contract with a Collins restaurant chain immediately. After all, Paul's lovely parents really started treating me like their son's future bride. Mom and Dad insisted I keep our relationship going for a while longer, so that the deal doesn't suddenly slip away. A year or two, until they set up all the restaurants. What? A year? Another year I have to be in this strange relationship with a guy I don't really like, but rather hate. He's mean, petty, selfish. This relationship has left me with almost no friends, and I feel like an outcast at school. I dream of finishing school very soon and going to study in Europe, and then our relationship would definitely have to stop. Do you think I did the right thing by satisfying my parents and agreeing to date Paul? Hey guys, I'm Sue, and I have a superpower everyone would envy. No, I cannot move in seconds. I don't throw a web from my hands, and I don't do master telekinesis. My superpower is that I don't sleep. At all. Can you imagine how much free time I have? While you're spending 1/3 of your life sleeping, I manage to do everything. But do I enjoy the superpower? And how did it come out that I became incapable of sleeping? Don't worry, I'll tell you. Just watch the video till the end. Well, let's start from my childhood. I've always been a sleepyhead, and I liked sleeping most of all, even when I was too small. My parents told me everyone in the neighborhood envied them. While other kids were constantly crying, nagging, demanding attention, I was peacefully sleeping in my bed at everyone's excitement and pleasure. A perfect and calm kid. However, when I went to kindergarten, I started having problems. It was too difficult to make me get up in the morning. I didn't want to go anywhere, and I always asked my parents to let me sleep more in my warm bed. But during the daytime nap in kindergarten, I was the first to go to sleep, and I was kinda a sleeping role model for other kids. Anyway, I liked sleeping, and sleeping liked me back. I had the same problems at school. I hated my alarm clock. I woke up from the 5th try, and the whole day long I felt sleepy and unhappy. Especially my sleepiness showed itself in autumn or in winter. This time of year, there was absolutely no sunshine in our city. The whole days were dark gray and gloomy. That's why the only thing I really wanted in these days was to crawl under my warm blanket and fall asleep. And, on the contrary, when it was sunshine, I could wake up before the alarm clock and be happy all day long doing something. My parents, who were happy about my ability to fall asleep fast when I was a kid, were, however, worried when I became a teenager. So they made me see a doctor. But the doctor made them stop worrying. He said everyone is sleepy in our town. It's all because of the rainy and gloomy weather. There's nothing special about it. Melatonin, the hormone controlling our sleeping, stops appearing in the body because of the lack of sunshine. Such rapid atmosphere pressure changes provoke arterial blood pressure. We get less oxygen and want more sleeping these days. Probably, I also started to depend on the weather and the sun. That's why I've been walking like a sleepy zombie all day long and went sleeping every time I had a chance. By the way, the doctor said the sleepy condition may be related to some brain damage and advised me to pass another medical examination. But my parents and I decided no need to worry, as I only got sleepy symptoms and nothing else. Turned out in vain. When I had a before and after moment in life, I got into a car accident. It happened when I was coming back from school. It was a rainy and a little foggy day, and as always, I wanted to sleep very much and get home as fast as possible to have a little nap before doing my homework. My way home from school was about a 20-minute walk, so I always plugged my ears with my headphones and turned on my favorite music or some audiobook not to get bored. It was the same on that unfortunate day. I had my headphones on, the music was on 100% volume, and I was hurrying home. I thought I'd managed to run across the road on beaming traffic lights, but I never even guessed that a drizzling rain and a fog may make me less visible for the driver. And then I heard the brakes screech, someone screaming, and complete darkness. When I became conscious, I didn't realize at once why I was in the hospital, why I was having such a terrible headache, and why my mom was crying when she saw me looking at her. It turned out, that day, a car hit me. The driver was taking a turn on an average speed, but he didn't see someone was crossing the road. That's why he didn't manage to hit the brakes, and we collided. I was pushed away for several meters. I had a hard head blow. The aftermath was terrible. First it was clinical death, then a 2-week coma. I can't even imagine what my parents had to go through. However, once I managed to come to my senses, my condition started getting better. Fortunately, no serious consequences after this car accident happened to me. I didn't lose my memory as it often happens in the movies. I didn't go blind and I didn't lose my limbs. My arm was broken. I got serious injuries and a mark from the blow on my head which was about to turn into a scar. Sometimes I had headaches at night, but the injections helped me. They relieved the pain and I could sleep well. I learned that something was wrong with me since the first day they discharged me from the hospital. I spent almost 2 months there, and I was dreaming to get home as soon as possible in my beautiful and sweet bed. I imagined I would climb under the blanket and sleep until lunch. I was free of school for a while for well-known reasons. How surprised I was when I got into my favorite bed and I didn't feel my habitual sleepiness as soon as I closed my eyes. I'm not used to having problems with sleep at all. As soon as my head touched the pillow, I would start sleeping. Not this time. I was turning from one side to another, and anyway, I didn't sleep. In the morning, I went downstairs feeling tormented and having a wild headache. Me and my parents decided it's just the way I'm getting adapted to home after a long stay in the hospital. But during the day, I tried hard to sleep, but I didn't manage to. And the same with the next night. I was dizzy. I would stare in space for several minutes, and I couldn't concentrate on anything or carry on a conversation. Eventually, my mom called the hospital. She spoke to my doctor, and he advised her to make me a sedative injection, just like they did in the hospital. Hallelujah. It worked out. I fell asleep during the daytime and woke next morning. It was so cool to feel relaxed and fresh again. Now I wasn't sleepy at all. I helped my mom. I met my friends and I watched my favorite series. Anyway, I got back to normal life. But as soon as night came, I understood my life probably will never be normal again. I couldn't fall asleep again, though I tried so many ways to do it. Well, I drank chamomile relaxing tea, counted sheep, tried to meditate, listened to music. Nothing helped. And for the next 2 days, the same. I talked to the doctor on the phone, and he said my insomnia could be a non-discovered aftermath of the car accident. Thus, me and my mom went to the hospital for an extra examination. It lasted for several weeks. We even had to call doctors from other cities for a joint consultation. The local doctor saw these symptoms for the first time in his life and was unable to diagnose me. All this time, I hadn't been sleeping at night. Surprisingly, I felt very fresh. But sometimes they gave me special injections so that I got a little nap. Well, the doctors came to the conclusion that the part of my brain responsible for sleeping wasn't functioning well even before the car accident. After the accident, this malfunction changed its way to a completely different one. So my body just decided that sleeping is for losers. It's gonna feel great even without sleeping. No one has ever invented a medicine for absolute insomnia, as the doctors called it. That's why the only thing I can do now is to stay awake all the time. Sometimes I still have to use the injections, so that my brain can relax a little. I've been living like this for a year already. Of course, I feel stressed because of the illnesses. I feel tired and broken, but learned to live with it. Thanks to my sickness, now I have plenty of time. I learned several foreign languages at once, and probably I would finish school earlier than people usually do. What's your attitude to sleeping? Do you like sleeping? Or you think all the interesting things happen at night? Leave your comments below this video. If you enjoyed my story, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Never miss new videos. Turn on notifications to stay tuned. Bye everyone.